I am happy, you are happy, let us be happy together, whether the weather is cloudy or sunny. I will always be your funny honey bunny. I am lucky, you are lucky, let us get lucky together, whether the weather is cloudy or breezy. I'll be there to say, hey, come on, let's take it easy. 'Cause isn't it nice to have the friends that you do? And isn't it nice that the sky is so blue? And isn't it nice to say I love you, chugga chugga choo choo, woo woo. I am smiling, you are smiling, let us smile together, whether the weather is cloudy or stormy. I will still be there in the morning, I'll be right by your side in the morning, I'll make you breakfast in the morning, I hope that you like cereal.
Yay! So,
She's adorable.
Yes, she is. So, one of the, I think I've got two happy endings before we finish out with our questions for Philip Ittner on this, and he'll be joining us, I hope, Wednesday. I will be traveling Thursday, but we will be able to do the morning show, and hopefully he'll be able to join us. My two happy endings, besides the jobs numbers, which are fun because they're good for the country, but also because they make Fox News mad, is Johnny Million's shirt with his cat on it. That has and I think he has his cat on his lap right now. At the same time, no, it's the cat. No, she's in the other room.
I had to go try to chill her out.
Understood. And then, of course, the number of trolls we're getting, which proves we're actually having an impact. They're having to show up. I'm literally starting to chart on the pushback factor. It's so good. And it's a good way to know you're right. Okay, so other questions, and that Philip is with us yet again. And what other questions do we have there, Johnny Million?
All right, let's see here. What are from Michelle Crocker? This is a super chat. What are the chances of Ukraine winning this war? Are the Russians getting desperate?
I think the Ukrainians winning this war is not. I don't just think they have a chance. I think it's an inevitability.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they are going to win this war because for them, just surviving is winning. Right. And when Kiev didn't fall, I think the die was cast. Yeah. They may lose Donbass. They may not get Crimea back. There's a number of factors that could happen. We have yet to see the counteroffensive. The counteroffensive is still coming. The will of the Ukrainian people to continue fighting is still very high. They will win this war. They will. Ultimately, the Ukrainians are going to win this war because there will be a country called Ukraine, and it will not be a colony of Moscow at the end of this. So,
right.
Absolutely, they're going to win.
Just for the record, 4 of the HIMARS that the U.S. has sent have arrived already in Ukraine, are in use. 8 more arriving this month, and 8 more next month, the first 2 weeks of August. With the 4 that they have, they destroyed 21 Russian ammo dumps, ammo sites in 72 hours. Yeah. That this break the Russians were counting on for regroup is timed incredibly poorly for refitting, because it means consolidation around certain points that they know are completely safe, where they can basically set up camp and fix these things, which makes them singular targets away from even Russian-leaning civilians in those areas. They're not going to just fall back and have dinner at home or something under the illusion that that they actually live in the Donbass. They have taken over facilities, sites, town centers, and turned them basically into impromptu military bases, and settling back into those places and distancing themselves from civilians because they don't trust those civilians. There was an outbreak in Donbass this week where Ukrainians were fighting from the center and claimed a piece of territory that was significant from the inside out. That was a first. And largely that has to do with the fact that they were getting cover from these HIMARS to start doing this. And there are increasing numbers of areas where that's going to happen, that once the counteroffensive happens, the eating from the inside of the area that's been claimed by Russia is going to be bigger, because
they're going to be saboteurs. They're going to be saboteurs. They're going to be partisans. They're going to be guerrilla fighters. Look at what's happening in Kherson already. In Donetsk, even in Donetsk, there's reports that they're citing these places, and that's how they're able to bring in the precision HIMARS, because they actually have people revealing where the Russians are hiding their ammo.
Right.
and creating their storage dumps. So, look, so far in this war, it has been predominantly a conventional war. But there is no doubt in my mind whatsoever that there will be saboteurs, partisans, guerrillas. That the Russians can take territory, but holding it is a very different thing.
Right. Johnny Million, another question?
Yeah. So EO over in Twitch wants to know if Brittany Griner will be used as a bargaining chip in the U.S. involvement in Ukraine.
I think absolutely. That's why they took her. However, I don't know if it will work, because then that just encourages them to keep doing stuff like that.
Right. And
I hope she gets home as soon as possible.
Right. And I do think she's to some degree safer than the other guy who they are accusing of directly spying. Like he's in more material danger there than she is, because the problem with, with her as racist and anti-LGBT as the Kremlin is, they do recognize worldwide. Even the people on Channel 1 have been talking about how isolated they are becoming from the world. And any chance, even if they claim the Donbass and say it's ours and now it's part of Russia and we're settling in and, before the next big weird push, if they're going to interact with the rest of the world, being seen as, that provocative in the world as far as playing that poorly with your neighbors in that regard and doing something awful to her would not help them. It's the bargaining chip would be, she's being treated well, she's safe, and look, here she is, she's got a big screen TV in her cell, that kind of stuff. That's their best propaganda use of her time, until she's traded for at some point. The other guy, and I'm blitzing on his name right now.
Whelan?
Whelan, that's what it is. He, I almost said Wheeler. He's been accused of spying, and that's that.
Well, he's a Marine.
Yeah.
And so, they say, but, look, it's absolutely right what the State Department is saying and what Biden has said. Americans should not be going to Russia right now. Absolutely, 100% not. I wouldn't step foot in Russia right now. And they could use my vlogs against me. Absolutely. They will continue to do this.
Talk about cancel culture.
I feel terrible for her. I feel terrible for her and for her wife. And I hope she gets home soon. I really do. But we can't. Yeah. I don't know. It's such a desperate, awful situation. We can't just let them use her as a bargaining chip, because then they will just take another American.
Because the other thing they're not afraid to do is soft capture people from other countries that are traveling and say, well, this is Russian territory right now, so we just took them.
Well, they've already floated that idea. They floated that idea on Pier Canal about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. They said all these foreign dignitaries that are coming to Kiev, maybe one day they go to sleep in their sleeper car in their train, and they wake up instead in Moscow. And so saying basically, let's go and kidnap
let's kidnap prisoners to exchange on, for these things. And arguably that it shows more than ever, I think, how they've fallen into more of a North Korean system than even a Chinese system, where there is a lot of business back and forth, and they're trying to, create some kind of balance, as imbalanced as it is currently. I don't know why Russia has seen the North Korean business model as something to emulate, but maybe they think they don't have another choice at this point. But yeah.
Audio real gurgly.
Maybe she hopped on. No, somebody told me about the pronunciation of Kiev. Kiev.
Next week, and hopefully
that is
with a smoother system. Take care of yourself and take care of somebody else.
Kiev. That's the Russian pronunciation. The Ukrainian is either Kiev. I've heard that out of a Ukrainian mouth.
We're going to continue this conversation online.
It is traditionally Kiev.
Okay, man, that was a tooth pull. I was trying to give Chicago that other to bring them into WeChat. Listen to me, because I'm thinking about China. To bring them into the Ecamm software as a guest, which would make the audio easier to route to and from them without any kind of buckle. And they couldn't get it up and running because
they couldn't connect.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll do a test on it. It shouldn't be that hard. It should be the exact same system. They just have to okay it. Because I can do audio only guests on that, but whatever. Hold on one second. I'm going to, in the meantime, shut off all these.
Cat here, Hal.
Bring me back.
All
there
right,
we go.
so you didn't hear my explanation of the pronunciation of Kiev.
Can you hear me, Hal?
We've talked about it in the past. I think if you go back, you'll find it.
Yeah.
Hal, I need to go tend to Flora.
I understand. If you got a moment, Philip, I'll keep you on for a couple seconds and we'll answer some questions. And before
Sure.
we'll let Johnny bow out early. Hold on one second. Let me
let me cut and paste the last questions I've got here.
Okay. Are you going to send them to me in there? Yeah, you can send them in the chat for the...
Yep, they're in the guest chat now.
Lovely. Okay, thanks so much, brother. Okay.
Love ya.
Bye. Cheers.
See you, Johnny.
Yeah. Yay, there he is.
Hey, there we go.
Yeah, look at
Let me
that.
take a quick look at these.
So yeah, they'll be in the guest
From
chat.
Twitch, are there embedded reporters on the ground? Yes, there are, with Ukrainian troops. How many dead Putin generals? Last I saw, I think we're in the double digits.
Yeah, it's 14 that I saw confirmed last. I think it's 16 now. Let's see, Russian.
It sounds about right. I was going to say somewhere around the 16 mark.
Well, they've started.
If I'm a fan of this is Spinal Tap. Hey, my love for Spinal Tap goes all the way up to 11.
Let's see, that's March. Let me see if
there are post offices working just fine. Museums are hit or miss. Maybe I should have phrased that better. Intercity trains, yes, they're operating and they're running not completely throughout the country. Obviously, not into the Donbass or into the conflict zone. And for example, I had to when I was looking at coming back to Kiev from Odessa, there was only one train and it traveled at night, and I suspect that was because of security measures. So the war is affecting train travel, but by and large, things are operating relatively normal.
Mm-hmm.
How much of Ukraine is actually in ruins? Far more than should be.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be. I mean, I've seen figures. Trillions. It's going to take to reconstruct Ukraine. So there's going to have to be a lot of investment.
Yeah, it's going to need to be a Marshall Plan.
Russia's got to pay for some of this.
Yep. Last list I have was from June 6th, although there were others. Like the news is a bit shuffled around this. Because June 7th, 2 generals were killed in one day.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to find the latest July numbers. But we're at least 16 now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of them was, again, that my favorite story of them is the one he was shot down flying a helicopter. The stories were from the Russians, like the telecom back and forth, that he was drunk at the time when he was shot down. He decided to do a buzz back. They'd shot something, and then he buzzed back around to kind of, you guys, and they shot him out of the air. And he was apparently a guy who, with a buddy of his, had stolen a MiG, effectively, like a big fighter jet. Not a MiG, but one of their big fighter jets that he had no right to be in, and he wasn't checked out on. They just took it for a joyride. He was demoted at that time down to, he lost his rank for a little while, but they gave it back to him right away. And he was drunk, and they destroyed the plane. They had to eject. And that's like a $24 million plane.
Yeah. It's
amazing.
Crazy. It's crazy. And they are drunk. They're look, there's a real big problem with them getting drunk and doing stupid, well, we're off the radio, doing stupid shit.
Right.
I mean, how many videos have I seen of them just rolling around in tanks, doing donuts and stuff, which is terrible for your tank. I mean, those tracks are not, you have to refit those things a lot. They're just bumbling through this country.
There's an article in the Daily Beast titled "Russian Troops Embarrassing Drunk Fest in Ukraine Prompts Alcohol Bans." Because literally, the Kremlin had to issue a no drinking. Seriously, guys, no drinking. Which you do recognize that, like, other serious militaries don't have to do during wartime. Like, you just snatch people up, and effectively it could be a reason for court-martial if you're found to be, I
mean, that's why we always use, when I was on an American military base in Afghanistan or Iraq, we would oftentimes try and sneak off to one of the Europeans because the Brits are allowed two cans of beer a week, and the French get a rationing of red wine, being French. And the Italians as well. But we have General Order Number 1. General Order Number 1 in the United States military, when you are deployed, especially to a country that is Islamic and therefore doesn't drink alcohol, they are forbidden from drinking. In
Pakistan, I don't know if you heard this story. This is like, Pakistan's kind of a wreck right now. It's crazy. Like, it's not Sri Lanka bad, but it's getting close. And it's not even charting in the news over here. It's amazing to me, considering their nuclear power and their, talk about a failed state. They're like teetering. They've been teetering for a long time, but this is really bad. They raided the Chinese embassy offices and the house of the Chinese ambassador because he was selling alcohol. He was hoarding alcohol from other, because they were allowed to have alcohol on the Chinese embassy grounds. So he was ordering more than he needed, and he was selling it in the history of Chinese guanxi and making money, in that kind of Russian style.
I lived in Pakistan for a year. I worked for Voice of America. And you can get alcohol if you're a foreigner. Right. But you have to have a special license and an ID for it. And there's a huge black market for alcohol in Pakistan.
The Chinese ambassador, and I want to say he was like the executive director assistant of the Chinese ambassador. The Chinese ambassador apparently never goes. It's the guy who's the effective Chinese ambassador there, because he's the one who lives there, was just basically running a liquor store out of his house and out of the Chinese embassy. And the Pakistani authorities raided the place. Like, what? Yeah. When's the last time? Think of a time, like, we've had like Secret Service guys get caught messing around in countries and they get disciplined and it's a big scandal and but imagine an American embassy raided by the authorities because they are selling contraband. Yeah. What? So
Karen Webster, I'm looking at the chat. Karen Webster, go back and try and watch the rest of Come and See. I know it is a very difficult movie to watch. It is one of the most horrible war movies I've ever seen, and it's a really hard watch. But boy, it's worthwhile, because it'll give you an understanding of what happened on this territory. Now, that takes place in Belarus, not in Ukraine. But we have to remember, and Hal and I have talked about this many times, that this country has been traumatized for centuries, and not least of which during the 20th century. And so, if you can give it another go, maybe take it in chunks, but Come and See will give you an understanding of why it is there's generational trauma in Ukraine, in this part of the European continent.
By the way, in looking for that Pakistan raid story, I didn't talk about it. I saw there was a news story this week that India raided the offices of a Chinese telecom company, Vivo, and effectively shutting them down because they were spying. They were effectively running a spy ring using Chinese telecom. That the same reason the United States doesn't want Huawei in the United States because of the security breaches in there. The Chinese have had to, because a lot of countries cue off our concerns, like Israel and other countries aren't going to, if we kick out Huawei, we're late to the game most of the time. We're serious about the stuff, but we tiptoe around it for quite a while before we actually get through it. Look, TikTok is still standing, but but the rest of the world, like they go, if America hates it, we're not, it must be bad. if they're putting their foot down. We did that with Huawei. So China had to move through the other telecoms and start doing the same thing they were doing with Huawei. And in this case, in India, Vivo. And the Indian authorities are running constant investigations into, quote, Chinese firms and warn such. And the Chinese are warning that this will impede the improvement of the business environment in India, chills the confidence and willingness of other foreign nations' business to invest and operate in South Asian market following raids. No, it won't. As a matter of fact, everybody else will be more comfortable doing business in India if they don't think they're being spied on by the Chinese, because one of the reasons they're moving to India is because they're tired of being spied on by the Chinese. It's adorable.
Yeah, I'll tell you a quick story about Russians and booze if you want to hear it.
Yeah, sure.
When I was about 4 days after 9/11, the attacks of 9/11. Mm-hmm. I was living in Moscow and I was working for CBS. And at the time, nobody could get into Afghanistan through Pakistan. You had to go through the north because that was the only remaining area in Afghanistan not controlled by the Taliban. Mm-hmm. Now, to get into northern Afghanistan, what you have to do is you have to go to the Central Asian country of Tajikistan, where Russia had bases, still does. And you get a ride on a Russian helicopter, an old Mi-24 or something to that effect. And so the Russians had to fly you into Afghanistan. And we got on this helicopter. There were about 8 of us. And the two Russians could hardly stand up. They were swaying the entire time. They stank of vodka. And then as we're flying over the Hindu Kush, and maybe we're getting over the summit of these mountains by maybe 5 or 6 feet at most, and the air is really thin up there. So we're not getting, helicopters are not great for going over high elevation areas. Anyhow, so we're like just going over these peaks, and these guys are clearly drunk. Right. And then not only that, one of the pilots kind of gets up and we're, as we're kind of clearing over the Hindu Kush, we're coming into land sort of thing. And he comes back and he sits on the fuel tank, this big yellow fuel tank that clearly says in Russian, "Do not smoke."
Right.
And this guy pulls out a cigarette and starts smoking on the fuel tank. And all of us, all of us in the back of the helicopter.
He's more of a guy than a rule.
No, you tell him not to do that. I'm not going to tell him not to do that.
Oh my God!
So they are very fatalistic, and they don't get it between them and their booze. They will do stuff like that. So I'm not surprised this general did that at all. I'm not surprised these guys are going on joyride, with tanks
with their
and
own
stuff
planes,
all wasted.
Right. There was a, in Pakistan last year, August of last year, there was an attack in Karachi. Suicide bombers attacked specifically Chinese academics. And the Chinese academics thing was part and parcel to the Chinese system of like infiltration of U.S. and U.K. Universities with Chinese state activists who are put in there specifically to start building these like pro-China, pro-CCP organizations within the schools and that kind of stuff, and quite frankly put down stories about Tiananmen Square or any Chinese person who comes there and thinks they're still Chinese citizens, but when they're in the United States, they feel free to say what they want. These folks keep them from doing it. They warn them not to even try, that kind of stuff. And there's been some pushback in the United States that started. Chinese American communities, especially, are pushing back on this. It's nice to see, and it's a slow process because there's all this back and forth about because China is a namesake, is a country and a people. There's always this worry about talking about Chinese could be the country, the government, the race. That as racially homogenous countries, it's always hard to push back on things that they do because of the idea that it's racist towards the people, not the government, and the thing, whatever. Anyways, Pakistan, they don't care. And the LBA just has thought, oh, these people are coming in to try and teach our people this atheistic communism business that they're going to do. And the Islamic groups there, I think it's the SLA, just started killing them. And that's an ongoing thing here. That's happening throughout Africa. There's a bunch of these incidents happening because they think they're going to use the BRI as a way to pave through. And they believe, I guess, the hype around the British Empire stuff, that when the British Empire came in, as awful as they could be at times, they built stuff they intended to leave behind. That was different. It's an odd thing in history, but it's true that when they in Africa, for example, to help stop the slave trade in Africa, the British went to the Sultan of Zanzibar and said, "We'll build a rail across your country so you can lower the amount of work and you won't need as much labor. So you have that, and you just stop participating in the slave trade. Stop selling people." And they're blockading boats and all that other stuff. At this point, the idea was, we'll leave this behind if you just quit it. And they did the similar things in India. And again, not forgiving a lot of the stuff that they did where they were trying to seize territory, but this was part and parcel to it. Wholly different. There is zero evidence that the Chinese want to leave any of this behind. And as a matter of fact, if you look at Sri Lanka and the claim of that 99-year lease on the port there, they intend to take the country. They intend to eventually take all those places. And the idea that somehow Russia and China are now strange bedfellows that are going to get along when both of them are enacting a similar plan, the only thing I can take from it as far as what they must believe about each other is that Russia and China, that Xi and Putin in their personal conversations have done you take that part, I'll take this part discussion of the whole world.
And we have common enemy in America. Let's just put our differences aside and let's attack the West first. We didn't even get a chance to talk about the G20 and what a debacle that has been for Russia. And Lavrov rocking up to
right.
He had to leave early because he was getting, insults shouted at him. And then because I monitor all their social media stuff because the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the embassy in London and Maria Zakharova, who I know personally. And so I'm on Facebook with her and I watch what they put out. And it was interesting to me yesterday that they did this whole thing about and the West says that Russia is completely isolated. Well, does this look like we're isolated? And it was Lavrov sitting with different delegations. But if you went and you looked at the pictures of the delegations, I mean, I don't want to insult anybody who may have heritage in various places around the world, but they were not exactly powerhouse nations.
Right.
I'll just leave it at that. But it is and of course they hit up all the BRICS and all the rest of it, but they're still, it's.
They already have G20. Those relationships. They're not and effectively, quite frankly, I've said this for a long time. The idea that China has the world's second economy is I think on balance the same as the idea that Russia has the world's second biggest army or the biggest military. They're crap. Even though they're large, they're paper tigers largely. They're a mess. And the one thing I think the Ukrainian war has shown, especially about Russia's kind of standing, is that short of threatening the world with nuclear power, they are effectively powerless to extend real power in the world. If they did not have that threat, their tactical ability, their material ability would be non-existent, on par, or it'd be low. It's lower than Poland's. It's lower than Germany's. It's lower in, arguably, depending on how much, like you could say they build stuff and sell it to North Korea, or they sell it to Iran, so they make more tanks and stuff than they need in theory most of the time. They still don't have as much functional stuff of their own that they have people trained up on to use. And like I said, look at the rusty barrels of the tanks that are getting blown up in Russia and tell me.
Well, and I would be willing to bet that the stuff that they sell for export is actually military, systems and things that actually work.
Right.
Because they don't want to give the crap to their client states because they want the client states to keep coming back, whereas they can skim they can skim off the top of the stuff that's just going to sit around in a warehouse or in some army camp somewhere in Rostov-na-Don.
That, I mean, again, I've been looking into Shoigu, that dude, over the last few weeks, and I mean, just a gross dude, and on so many levels.
They all are.
But the part about his 18-year-old daughter having an $18 million house outside of Russia that he lives in, but it's in her name because somehow that makes it okay, is just goofy. But the fact that as soon as this attention started getting paid to people, I think there was an article about it in early June, the records of sale have come offline. They've just evaporated. So the Russians inside are now, they're just tearing up their own legal documents, because and it's hard for people to, let's say Putin falls and we have another 91. We go through another 91 where people rush in to kind of fill the void and they're like, we're opening, whatever. Nobody owns that dude's house. Like, you could just squat in it, I guess, because Russia has no record or won't keep a record of this guy's $18 million house. So it's like Chinese ghost cities or something. Like, nobody technically knows who owns them right now. Are the Russians reacting to the July 4 parade shooting? They play up that stuff a lot.
Yeah.
The rest of the world does. I mean, it's one of the things that they mock worldwide, except in places that have, where you're like Yemen or parts of, North Africa and places like that, where it's, South Africa, even countries where it's, off the scale of that. And even still, the problem that I see with Russia as far as the gun thing, and Maria Butina is, the fact that she slept with the dude from, what was it?
The NRA.
Yeah, not just the dude from the NRA, the dude from Overstock, who was the Trump dude who was in the White House with him. She just magically has an affair with the CEO of Overstock. Like, what? Anyways, she was bringing groups of people from the NRA and the Republican Party to Russia for these big, like, pro-NRA things when they have none of those rights in Russia. There is no Second Amendment in Russia. And if Russia ever took over, or we had a government even remotely similar, it would be gone in a day.
Well, they know exactly what they're doing when they do stuff like that. They don't really care about the Second Amendment or Americans' rights to bear arms. It's just a way to attack us. It's the same thing I say all the time about them. They weaponize whatever division, whatever stress point exists between us internally within the United States, within the Western, community of nations. If they can find a wedge to drive between people, because their whole concept is divide and conquer, they don't care about the Second Amendment. They don't care about the African American community in the United States. They don't care about the rule of law. Frankly, they bang on and on about the rule of law. But they don't have it in their own country. Right. So it's all just a device to attack the West. So I don't.
And again,
when they get critical about us, I usually either just shrug it off or just recognize it for what it is, and it's just weaponized information.
By the way, Spice Girl 6, you won the hat. I'm just saying, in the raffle. It just ended. So congrats and thank you. I didn't want to drag it on.
I'm trying to read the chat as best I can without my glasses because people are getting frustrated with me taking it off and putting it back on. Somebody asked how I'm doing on a personal level. I'm fine. Thank you very much. I'm holding up. It is time for me to get back to the States for a little bit. So I welcome this this brief trip back, and then I'll come back here, and I'm actually looking at maybe setting up a proper studio, TV studio. So we'll see if maybe we can do that and then do like roundtable discussions and things like that. We'll see. I don't know. Early days.
Right. Robin Blade saying Hunter's laptop is propaganda from Fox News. I would argue it is propaganda directly from Russia. It is interesting to me, and watch as stuff rolls out, that there was in a laptop that maximum had a hard drive that could hold 250 gigs. There are 416 gigs of data on the hard drive that Rudy Giuliani has been shopping around. And that's, and even if you unzip all the zips, I call BS. Secondarily, I would say that basically they used it for every piece of compromising catch-all that they could use and manipulate, both real and deep fake that they mix together. And they're slow rolling the release of embarrassing stuff, but not germane to anything. Like the footage, the stuff that came out about Hunter Biden this week, I think proves that Joe Biden is a good father who cares for his son, because it's literally the story in the Daily Mail is, here's this picture of right after he asked his dad for money for rehab, here he is smoking crack in a thing, which nobody knows it's crack, but they put crack in quotes so they can, because it's the Post, it's Rupert Murdoch. But the idea is that he was supposed to be in rehab, and he's asking his dad for money for rehab and going through all this stuff, and his dad gave it to him. Well, his son is alive, has beat his addiction, and is stable now. That's what you want for your child, your son, especially when they've gone through the trauma of, their own marriage failing, their brother dying of brain cancer, their own drug addiction. Again, these people all want to follow Mike Pillow into hell, but somehow Hunter Biden's a mess. But the Hunter Biden laptop, I will remind everyone, does not exist. It's not a real thing. But the hard drive that they've been shopping around is effectively a compromised hard drive put together by Russians that they were selling in Ukraine. That was the meeting point. That Rudy Giuliani came in. They were offering to sell it on the black market. Word was that it was $3 million. Rudy paid $5 million because his boss wrote the art of the deal. And he brought it back and he started copying it and sending it around to everybody. And it allegedly includes compromising pictures of underage girls, which means, yes, Rudy Giuliani, who just got stints put in his heart this week because apparently someone clapped him on the back. I'm kidding. It's because he eats garbage and smokes cigars all the time and never moves and is basically slovenly.
And drinks like a fish.
Yes, and drinks like a fish. Has been selling and disseminating what is effectively child pornography. There you go. Congrats, Rudy. You've broken that singular law. And to Letitia James or anybody in her office, I would like to say, can we just go with the stills that are faked on that thing that don't have even Hunter Biden in them, that are supposed to be just pictures of underage girls that Rudy Giuliani himself has said are on there? Giving them to law enforcement is fine, but copying them and giving them out to media and other people is technically the dissemination of that material for material gain. It's a contribution in kind to a campaign, but it's also he's getting paid to engage in this stuff. As Rudy's lawyer, theoretically, as Trump's lawyer, theoretically, but on his own as well. And that's against the law. So that alone should be enough to do those things. Now, it pops up every time we get a good jobs report number.
And it stinks of the GRU.
Oh, it's terrible.
I had a conversation last year in London with a very close friend of mine. He's a Georgian, Soviet Georgia, not Atlanta.
Right.
And he was actually an intelligence officer in the Soviet Union. He's old enough that he was at the tail end of the Soviet Union. And we were sitting down in London having a drink together, and he said to me something that clicked in my brain. He said, once you start seeing it, you can see it from miles off.
Right.
Once you start
recognizing the
way the Russians, their MO and the fingerprints that they have on things, you start to see it really easily and really clearly. I mean, when that laptop story started dropping, I was like, that sounds like the GRU all over the place.
Totally. And that's why the 50 intelligence guys all wrote that letter going, that's what this is. I mean, come on, stop playing stupid. Look, Hunter Biden had an addiction. He was also more than likely given honeypot job offerings that and was given jobs that he genuinely had value in, especially like at Burisma, where again, corrupt company for a long time, and investors wanted to invest in oil and gas, but they didn't want the money to go right out of their pockets and straight to Russia. That's what it kept doing. So having the former vice president's son there means that at least one of the three guys working at Rosemont Seneca can't disappear and start living high on the hog in Russia like the other people who had run investment schemes going into Russia. The money is there to be made, but we don't trust anybody. And at least this dude, if his dad ever wants to be president again, or if he's actually a man of his word, or if actually he wants to honor his own legacy as, after he's been vice president, that won't happen. That idea. And it's exactly what happened. I've said this many times on my show before when this story started coming out, but let's say I have a gun to your head and I say you have $10,000 that you have your life savings. You must invest it. Do you invest it in Burisma before Hunter Biden is there or after? That's the question. Easy choice. Easy choice. Because not only will you survive by betting on the second choice, you'll make money. You'll get your money back plus, a profit. Because that's what they ended up doing.
If you do business in Russia or with Russians, you're just corruption is part of the system.
It's baked in.
It's baked in. It's baked
Same
in.
thing. Well, in China, that's what they call guanxi. Right. They call guanxi right now. Which is basically you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. That there's we have this agreement that's above and beyond whatever contract we have. That's how the rest of it is, and that's kind of fine in terms of favoring on a personality level. You make bread and you make sure your bread is delivered to the nice guy in the shop as opposed to the jerk you have to sell to make your bottom line. You're going to drive the truck by that guy's house first because he's his business, because he's a good dude. And it's warm and it's fresh and it won't make a big difference. But to you, it's like, screw that guy. But you still stay in business. And the problem in China, it has to do with these local provincial governors and how they create bonds and how they sell and resell property and how they sell and resell now grain, which is one of the big things. The idea that all these stories about how China has stored half the world's grain. They've got half the world's grain in storage. They've got 2 years worth. So if they attack Taiwan, they got plenty of food. They don't have to worry about anything, which is garbage because they have to buy all our pork because they had to kill all their pigs. They've nowhere near the amount of food. They import 80% of their food, 85% of their energy. They're dead in the water in 3 months if they mess around with any of the stuff. They don't even have the Russian backup. Far too many people, far too much land, too many problems already to solve this that Russia didn't have at this point. So the overall, the idea that China's got Russia's back or that this is somehow a working model is absurd. And I think they're looking at how Russia's being treated in the world because of Ukraine and going, you know what? This is bad. This won't help us.
Which is just another reason why we need to keep supporting Ukraine.
That's right. And yes, and Wes, thank you so much, brother, for the support today. It's really appreciated for the subs and it's just great to see. It means a lot. And we are obviously punching above our weight in terms of the interwebs when you've got people like Tim Pool and Jimmy Dore who have about 1 million subscribers, and TYT that has their 3, and Russell Brand who has his 5. And here I am humping along with 36, but somehow mine are real, so we're making more of an impact. I think that's partially why. I mean, why would you even bother to knock down a station with less than 250,000 subscribers unless it was actually making a change? And I thank you guys for being with me during this, and thanks to Philip for being with us to kind of carry part of that message from Ukraine to you guys. Yeah.
I'll keep doing it as long as you want, as long as the audience wants it.
Mm-hmm. By the way, Malcolm Nance is selling a book, and it's going. I'm going to let you go too because it's nighttime. Look at that. Look at that.
Yep. You want to take a look?
Yeah. I got to say,
they're not lighting up the market like they used to.
Right. Of course.
I don't think that has anything to do with the war. I just think they're not doing it.
Mm-hmm. Well,
somebody had asked what that's the central market in Kiev called Bessarabsky Market, and it's a great place to go buy fresh produce and
fish
and pickled stuff,
everything. We can pickle that.
Pickled everything.
We can pickle that.
We can pickle that.
Right.
I have actually in my refrigerator right now. I have they do a thing called charam shah, which is basically garlic stalks. So the stalk that sticks out of the garlic above ground, they will chop that off and pickle it, and it's delicious.
Oh,
charam
wow.
shah.
So you're not making any friends, is what you're telling us.
Oh no,
Yes.
no smooching after that.
That's right.
But,
if they have some, it's okay, because that's
it's
the rule
delicious.
with garlic. That's the rule my girlfriend and I
That's
have
right.
about garlic. As long as we're both having it, we won't smell it. It's not a big deal, right? Anyways, everybody saying good night and stay safe. And
thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope I was informative. And go check out my vlogs.
Yes, you always are.
I'll see you on Wednesday, Hal.
That would be great. That'd
Thanks,
be great.
everyone.
Take care. Be safe,
right.
and
Support
we'll talk to you
Ukraine.
soon. Yes, Slava Ukraine.
Thanks.
Okay, cheers. There he goes. It's. I have to say, it's been a very special thing doing my radio show and being able to have my friend from high school, Johnny Million, who we were in our first band together, and he's been just a great friend for so many years, and having him on my radio show regularly over these last few years is it's heartwarming. It's fun. It's a great thing. He gave me a sounding board because I drink news from the fire hose, and he sips from it, and there's a balance to be had there that's helpful, and yet his moral and ethical instincts around a lot of the stuff are spot on. So it's terrific in that regard. And then to have, our new friend Philip, who I feel like I've become very, fond of Philip as a human being, as have many of you. I genuinely consider him a brother in this world after, him being on there. It's just great. And that is, I think, the one distinction I will say, as much as I am learning on the fly about building a show like this and the people in the chat and the ongoing kind of give and take of how much time I can spend, dealing with the chat and still do the show, or on my offline time, how much information I have to absorb to be useful and functional and funny with you guys on the regular show, and trying to work that emotional balance out. Because I feel like, I in my mind, how you always picture. Have you ever seen Mitchell's versus the Machines? It's a kid's movie. My kid loves it, and we watch it together sometimes. It's about this family that fights back against this robot uprising. But there's this perfect family that they kind of envy, and that in the end, this family, by the way, is still perfect in their own way. But the imperfections is what makes the Mitchells win. Ultimately, it's pretty great. But yeah, it's like the people in the Pottery Barn catalog just have their shit together. And I know what you're thinking. There are no people in the Pottery Barn catalog. Exactly. Because apparently no human lives in a situation where they have a wonderful white couch with a draped throw rug that's perfectly situated on the corner and one magazine. Those people, I just don't get it, like how people live like that. And I try, don't get me wrong. Aesthetics, I love them, but I usually collapse under function. And I imagine that there are YouTubers out there who spend all their days on their Discords and in their chat rooms being able to engage with the people that they have. But the numbers that they have, I know that's an impossibility. I call hooey. And I think more often than not, they have teams doing this because it's just not materially possible. And so I'm, not that lets me off the hook in my own eyes, but that's the balance I work with, being interactive with you guys as a group, as a chat, and trying to be as personal with as many of you. And I see a lot more of the chat than I'm able to respond to, and I read a lot more of the chat than I'm even able to integrate into the conversation. And I want you guys to know that it would be an impossibility to factor it all in. And much of what you're saying, I take to heart, and I recognize, even if and when I disagree with it, tactically or what have you, it factors into how I explain what I'm talking about, the clarity with which I want to present my solutions when I have them for things, or my explanations for things when they are needed, of geopolitical and domestic issues and politics and that like. And I just want you guys to know that. It's important for me to say that. And I don't always get to say it because we're always rushing, and especially on a day when I'm dealing with the tech aspects. Maybe it's closer to the front of my mind because I don't feel like I can pay as much attention as I would even want to normally. So that said, I'm going to let you guys go. And the Trump rally, there was one yesterday, and there's one this afternoon. He's doing it again. I mean, they're not so much rallies anymore. They're kind of petering out. And the one yesterday, people have been posting clips, so I've been able to read some of the stuff about it, but I haven't watched it yet because I think it is worth doing. Dragon, we're not Russian. Yes, this is true. Some trolls are, but yeah. The vast majority of the trolls that we have are just deluded by the Russian message, I would say. Misguided. So thanks, EO, for coming back. We appreciate it. Trump is always in Alaska. That's why they were talking about Alaska. I see. So anyways, I just wanted to say that about you guys. And I feel like I want to cover at least one of them just to see the state of decay in the Trump messaging world, because boy, is he scared. And boy, is it obvious. The sweaty freak out of Don Jr. this week in and of itself, and the whole like, look at Hunter Biden, like the amount of focus they've been doing on that, again, to me is indicative of how freaked out they are. Because as everybody who has a parent knows, but they is not an answer. If you're my kid, but they is not an answer. Because especially if you're an adult or you have intentions of presenting yourself as an adult, the but they part does not work. And both sidering is a cheap, crappy political version of but they.